welcome to another episode of All Things Moon, Lunar Wisdom for Everyday Life with myself, Kelly Jones. And this is the first episode of 2025. And yes, I know it's the 19th of January, but we've had a good long break from all things work. And this past week, we have been back to it here, back to the gardening, back to teaching yoga and teaching Pilates and organising events. And I had the first moon ceremony of the year on Monday for the full moon in Cancer, which was beautiful. Lots of attendees, lots of people signed up, even just for the recording. So a really good start to the year work-wise. Got a lovely retreat that I'm organising, a half-day retreat with a fellow Strala yoga guide, Natalie, and we've just today discovered that we have only one space left already, and that's in a week. We've nearly sold out for that half-day retreat, so really good start work-wise. In other ways, let's just say it's been a very intense start to 2025, particularly if we're talking about collectively and worldwide. We've had that very intense full moon last Monday, which was a full moon in Cancer. Full moons, more often than not, signify the ending of something. And being at this full moons are always bring up emotions anyway, like they pull on the tides, they pull up the water. But being in one of the most watery emotional signs of the zodiac, the sign of Cancer, there was definitely lots of feelings to be felt. And I do believe that it was designed that way. With Mars currently going retrograde backwards through the sign of Cancer, which really, if we think about it, retrogrades, as I've explained before, the planet's not really travelling backwards, it's actually stationed and everything else is moving forwards, which gives the appearance of moving backwards. But regardless, to Mars, the planet of action and moving forwards, he probably feels like he's going backwards. Mars is fiery and can be aggressive and full on and wants to, go to war. And being in the sign of Cancer, all of those expressions are watered down by attachment, by wanting to stay at home, by wanting to nurture, and by the emotion. But I think very much that Mars travelling through Cancer at this time of the full moon, it was designed to stir up emotion in us, because the numbness that has swept across the world like some kind of weird virus of tuning out and not being in the present moment, being engaged in what's going on around you, most definitely we can see that some big serious things are happening in the world for people to have to be in that present moment to, literally, if we take the literal archetypal significations of Mars, fire, and Cancer, the home, then we have seen lots of homes on fire over in California and Hollywood. So just reminding you again that these planets don't make these things happen, they don't cause it, but the energy of them being in certain places, just like the weather forecast, when we know that a storm could be likely, that snow could be likely, because the conditions are set that way, they are in alignment for those things to be more likely, then we don't know how it's going to show up or where it's going to show up, but these things are more likely to happen. And in some kind of strange way, in some kind of grand design, they've been brought to the surface. They've been brought to show us something. So maybe with Venus currently travelling through Pisces, with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, there's a lot of Pisces energy. And Pisces signifies, one of its expressions is compassion. And so we can see where these planetary alignments and energies and archetypal stories have brought about the need to show emotion, to show compassion, to bring us into the present moment with that Pluto in Aquarius, collective, humanitarian, community. All of those things are there. Anyway, and there's so much to tell you about. So I had a lovely Christmas break, been away lots of times in our camper van, visiting friends, visiting family, hiding out in the woods, being on the beach in Norfolk in the freezing cold, lighting fire pits, getting the log burner on, sitting doing nothing, and being much more present and having lots of time to reflect. And with Mars being in the sign of Cancer, as I have told you before, if you've been listening, that I actually have Mars in Cancer in my birth chart, and I have my Sun in Cancer, so I'm a Cancerian. And so I know that even though I've had this big rest and I feel energized enough to take some action, I know that that action could be frustrating and maybe not happen as fast as I would like it to. So the opposite sign of Cancer is Capricorn, and up until today, that's where the Sun has been residing, in the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn's a much more methodical, systematic, strategy and practical and goal-orientated than I am naturally. But I have tapped into that and made the conscious decision, knowing what was the likelihood, what the forecast was for myself, to sit down and plan, make some goals, have some goals. What is it that I want? Where is it that I'm going? How am I going to get there? How have I been trying to get there in the past that isn't really working for me? And that old saying of Einstein's theory of insanity is keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So where have I consistently been doing the same thing and hoping that it will go somewhere, and it doesn't really? All it does is just keep me in the same place. So they're things that I've sat down and pondered on, journaled on, meditated on, and actually had meetings and done some planning for some strategy and some goals. So we're actually in the last quarter moon phase now. So that actually is exact on Tuesday. This is Sunday the 19th that I'm recording this, and it will go out today as well. So last quarter moon phase on Tuesday, and that is a good time. Last quarter moon phase is always a good time to let go of anything that hasn't worked out since the last new moon. So anything that might be weighing you down, any baggage, something that's holding you back, so that you are ready for the next new moon to start afresh with renewed motivation, with renewed energy and a clearer path. In an ideal world, anyway, there's always going to be some kind of aspect or something to come along to kind of present itself as a roadblock. But the more we are aware, the more prepared we can be. The full moon in Cancer, as I said, brought lots of endings, and I have seen quite a lot of loss in this past week or so, and including for myself and my family, our family friends that we grew up with. So one of my dad's best friends, my mum and dad's best friends, George. He passed away right on the full moon, and also my nieces, their little rat called Nibbles, passed away. And this all happened in the home. My family was sitting with Nibbles whilst he passed away. And I also know of another friend who's lost her cat this week, and a few other losses, but all things to do with endings and around the home. So anyway, I don't want to drag the frequency down. Let's pull it back up, and let's jump into the fact that I believe it was on the 11th. I haven't got that written down in my notes, but on the 11th, pretty sure, the nodes of the moon moved signs. So every planet has got nodes, and because the moon is the closest one to us, the nodes of the moon have a great effect. And wherever the nodes of the moons are, we've got the north node and the south node. Wherever they are, that is where the eclipses will occur. So whichever sign those nodes are in is where the eclipses will occur in the next eclipse season. Although we are still seeing the ending of the last set of eclipses from that axis, which was the Aries-Libra axis, as we shift into the nodes of the moon being the north node being in Pisces and the south node being in Virgo. In a very, very basic way, the north node is kind of where we're heading collectively and personally. It's kind of, our destiny, our purpose, where we're moving towards. And the south node is kind of what we're leaving behind. It's old patterns and things that maybe things from ancestors and things from our own past and from our childhood, and patterns and habits and things that need to be left behind. So for this next year and a half, next 18 months, the things we'll be leaving behind will have the energy of Virgo around them. So it may be to do with health, it may be to do with it being an earth sign, it may be to do with being too perfectionist, wanting to be perfect, that strive for perfectionism. That could be what we're looking at leaving behind. And with the north node being in Pisces, that Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And if you're feeling a little confused about the fact that that Aries is the first sign and Pisces is the last, the moon's nodes are always retrograde. So they're always going to seem to move backwards towards the planet, the sign that was before. So sorry if that confuses you, but we're moving from Aries towards backwards into Pisces, or retrograde into Pisces. That's where they'll be going. So we're going to see a significant shift in the energy of where we're headed collectively and personally, because Pisces is that sign of, it's the most spiritual return to spirit. If you think of the whole story of the zodiac, it is the last part of the story when we've done the whole journey and we return to being spirit, to being ethereal, to being intangible. It's not solid matter. It's the unseen, if you like. It's a bit 12th housey, mysterious, bit mystical. And so that's where we're going to see the eclipses happening. So it's going to feel very, very different, that Aries pioneering start of the zodiac, taking a leap of faith, the I am. So we've been looking at, we've still got Chiron in Aries at the moment, and Aries is the I am. It's all to do with self, whereas Pisces is to do with the whole thing, unity. Nothing is separate, everything is connected to something else. Everything affects everything else. So that's where we're going to be seeing that energy. And I'll cover all that more in depth as we get nearer to the eclipse season, because there's so much more to be aware of in the very near and immediate future of this coming week. Another lovely energy that we've had kicking off this new year has been Venus moving into the sign of Pisces. So Venus is one of the planets that's closer to us. She's faster moving, and over Christmas period she was in Aquarius, and now she is swimming around like a mermaid, all beautiful and sensual in the water of Pisces. And this is a sign of her exaltation. And Venus will be in the sign of Pisces until February the 4th. And Venus brings our awareness and our attention to our relationship with the ethereal, with that Piscean, spiritual, unseen, fluid flowing everywhere, intangible energy. Nothing that's sort of solid and earthy, very watery and fluid. It offers us the opportunity to do soul-centered things, to make soul connections, to have those open-hearted, non-judgmental, egoless connections. It will also, Venus will bring the spotlight to relationships, to finances, and to values, and how that is interspersed with Pisces, that energy of Pisces. So, the relationship is not all about me. It's about the whole thing, how we are unified, and how can we be more creatively orientated with our finances, maybe. So where can we do something slightly different, and what our values are. So how are our values changing? If you're a Sagittarius rising, then that last full moon in Cancer was presenting itself in the 8th house. So I'm Sagittarius rising. So this energy of Venus, taking a look at our finances and how we value ourselves, and how that affects our relationships, was presenting itself in the 8th house of joint finances. And it's also, 8th house has a lot of other things wrapped around it, but I would say that its main emphasis here, with all of that wrapped around it, is joint finances, and making it a really, really good time to attend to financial matters. And I actually had a meeting this week with a very creative connection that I made, a girl called Georgia, and we were looking at using that Capricorn energy of strategy and how to creatively put me out there in the world of social media to help increase my finances, and how to make me more visible in the world. But also at the same time, so now I've got kind of a strategy in place with that. That can't start just yet, because I need to plan financially to include it into my budget. In the meantime, to make sure that that can happen, I have sat and the signs are everywhere. So even though that this has come up in the astrology, even before I was planning the full moon ceremony and looking at where it was hitting people in different houses according to their rising signs, I had already arranged this meeting. And I had also downloaded a book which was called Wounds to Wealth. And that book is by a lady, I think her name is Emily June Wilcox. But it's about the wounds that we carry with us that get in our way of being wealthy financially. And I thought I would take this time that I know that action is highly unlikely because of the Mars retrograde in Cancer, to plan ahead, and during that time, by the time I get there to that time when I'm ready to do all of this and take that action forwards, that I will have worked on the things that would get in my way, that are deep-seated beliefs and wounds. So it's interesting that sometimes it's really good to know what's coming so that you can be much more prepared. But also, when I start to look more deeply into this to share it all with you guys, that I realise that I've already done something intuitively, knowing that this was coming. So anyway, what else is going on? So Venus has been travelling through the sign of Pisces, and even though she loves it there and she's exalted there, of course, just like anything, as you're travelling, you usually come across some kind of roadblock, some kind of hold up, other travellers to deal with. And this week, Venus has been in a square to Jupiter, and could be lovely because Jupiter and Venus are the benefic planets. They're the better ones to bring together because they generally are an auspicious combo. But Jupiter being the planet that expands everything and can exaggerate everything, with Venus in Pisces, then we could have been looking at feeling overwhelmed. A really good time to look at where our boundaries are, because in Pisces, boundaries are hard to find. Pisces struggle with boundaries. So we could have overgiven. Venus likes to be indulgent, so we could have overindulged, and we could have overpromised, and we also could have overcommitted ourselves. So as today has arrived, Venus has moved on from that square to Jupiter and is now, she's bumped into strict Father Saturn, because Saturn is still in the sign of Pisces at the moment. And Saturn and Neptune are going to be moving out of Pisces this year. So it's a really, really big year in the way of all the outer planets are going to be moving signs. So kind of around June time this year, there's going to be a very, very big change in energy in the whole entire world, because we've got these really big shifts. And I will talk about those as they arrive in more depth. But today, the current moment, in the present moment, Venus is in a conjunction with Saturn. And Saturn is like the reality check. So as Venus is drifting and exalted in Pisces, being all overly everything, suddenly she bumps into strict Father Saturn, who wakes her up out of her illusionary dream, because remember, Neptune is still there in Pisces as well, and a cold dose of reality. Yep. To break you out of your over optimism. So I could give you an example of that. So where we've been, very excited about selling nearly well, it's sold out pretty much in a week. We've got one space left, and I think that's, pretty much gone as well. So let's just say we're sold out for our retreat in March. We've had more people inquiring, wanting to come along than we have spaces for. And that's some people wanting to come along with friends. So they'd rather either come with their friend or not come, which hence the reason we have one space. But if we fitted everybody in, we haven't got enough space. And we were discussing whether we would be able to fit everybody in, but that would be a bit of a squeeze. And so today I had to be the kind of Saturn, sensible, strict father person that says, well, actually, people come on retreat for space, and so we don't want to restrict space and it to feel a little bit overcrowded. So let's stick with the number that we said we would, and let's just arrange another one and give those people who missed out on this time, first opportunity to book on the next one. But, that was kind of, that over-optimistic feeling. We could have overbooked, but we had to get real about it. So that's a nice day-to-day situation where you could see these things cropping up. It doesn't always have to be a big drama or a big story. So Venus and Saturn together will kind of remind us to take full responsibility for our choices and how we still need to mature in some way. And being that they're in Pisces, that could be spiritual maturity. Yeah. Also, with Venus being there, it could be Saturn is very much to do with commitment, and Venus is to do with relationships. It could be commitment to the relationships that we value, because value is another word of the archetypal energy of Venus, and also making important financial decisions. So again, that brings me back to where I've been in this past week. Before I commit and the choices that I make, I need to be mature, sensible, realistic, not over-optimistic before I make those commitments and those changes to my planning ahead for when I can take action, for when Mars moves on. And Mars doesn't really move on out of Cancer until April, and that is the beginning of the zodiac year. So that kind of feels good to me that we're in spring, and I always think, new beginnings don't start till spring anyway, so, take the pressure off. So yeah, it's Venus and Saturn together is not as fun as it could be, but it's a really good time to commit to your spiritual practice. So that meditation practice that's waned, it's a good time to bring it back, to be still, and also to allow your creativeness to come out, because that will allow you the calmness to do those harder things with more ease. And the Strala Yoga that we're teaching on this retreat, Strala Yoga is very much about calm, ease, softening, so that we can do harder things more easily. So yeah, Jupiter and Venus have definitely helped us to fill our retreat as well. So what other things can I tell you? So there is a lovely energy coming up. When is that? It's on the 26th of January, and that is a sextile between Venus in Pisces and Uranus in Taurus. So a sextile is when two planets are roughly, so I'm having a little moment here are things falling over and falling down. Well, that'll do. So a sextile is when planets are 2 signs apart, so roughly 60 degrees apart. And sextiles are considered to be a harmonious aspect, and they bring us, it's like a supportive energy when opportunities can arise, generally a little bit more short-lived, but that is coming up between Venus, as she's in Pisces, and Uranus in Taurus. Venus is the ruler of Taurus as well, and that's exact on January the 26th. So that will help us explore alternative ways to relate to people, and maybe to discover unusual sources of income, whilst also helping us to welcome change and new perspectives, because Uranus is about change. He thinks differently, blows things out of the water, Venus in Pisces, and pulls it down to earth into reality, and maybe a revolutionary or radical maverick way of doing things. So again, this Wounds to Wealth book that I'm reading at the moment will help me to look at different ways of approaching the same thing, so I don't keep getting the same result. Just finally here, a little bit heavier, a little bit of a controversial, but will affect us on a collective level, whether we live in the US or not. As we know, whatever happens over in America generally tends to spread out across the world. They seem to have a great influence on us all. But we have on Tuesday the Sun conjunct Pluto. So the Sun has entered the sign of Aquarius today, and the Sun is going to come alongside, because as we know, Pluto moved into Aquarius at the end of last year, and it is still at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and the Sun is coming into Aquarius, so they are next to each other. And that is the exact same day that the inauguration of the new, or not so new, president. So this second time for the president that they have chosen this time. So, I don't have much opinion around that, really. I don't want to get into that. This is not a political statement or anything. It's to show you the astrology of that moment. And the Sun conjunct Pluto in Aquarius has never before occurred on Inauguration Day. The Sun conjunct Pluto, so next to Pluto, is a very challenging aspect. And it really, remembering that the Sun would be showing us the conscious ego side of the mind, and Pluto is all very relative to power. So it could indicate egotism, authoritarianism, power struggles, powerful enemies, power struggles, propaganda, things like that. Could even, be around plots and corruption, secrets, that kind of stuff. The Roman Emperor Nero had the Sun conjunct Pluto in his, and it brought the abuse of power and destruction. So, not suggesting that any of that could happen, but as we know, we are kind of on this cusp of the end of the old ways, these corrupt ways, and the beginning of a completely different future that's much more Aquarius. So this inauguration is happening right on that moment. Most empires last about 248 years, and that's one Pluto return. And if they do survive their first Pluto return, they usually undergo a dramatic transformation. And this inauguration marks the end of the USA of their Pluto return. So if you think of a country's birth chart as to when it became the USA, from that moment of birth, this is 248 years Pluto return. So no idea what the ramifications of that are, but sometimes you can't sugarcoat it. On a more personal level, for ourselves, with Pluto in Aquarius, where it's going to remain for the next 20 years, whenever another planet comes into Aquarius now, it's going to obviously meet Pluto, because Pluto is going to be there for 20 years. So he's kind of like, house sitting in Aquarius at the moment. And any guests that come in are going to have to live with Pluto for a little while. Aquarius is to do with the higher mind, to do with consciousness, new frequencies. And if we look that out there into the world, there's so much stuff out there now that you can listen to. So many things being created to do with frequency, to do with the higher mind, to do with consciousness. On that note, on January 31st, that's Friday, the January 31st, if you are local, we have our first Gong to the Moon gong bath of the year, which ties in with the new moon in Aquarius. So on the note of new frequencies, if you've not experienced that before and you're interested in expanding your consciousness and finding out about all of sound healing and things like that, then we have a lovely new venue at Highwood Village Hall near Chelmsford. Lovely heated floor, eco building, great acoustics in there. So really looking forward to that the end of this month. But back to bringing, this Pluto and the Sun together in Aquarius. Pluto brings us down into the kind of underworld of our psyches, into the depths, and into transformation, very sacred transformation. The purpose of any Pluto transit or aspect is that of empowerment and transformation. So as the light of the sun, the light of our awareness, is brought into that sort of depth of Pluto, then awakening to our true power and our true potential is much more possible. It allows us to become aware of our patterns, of our fears, the things that have held power over us, if you like, that are unconsciously directing us. So once again, this diving into where I'm wounded around the area of wealth and finances, all very much that 8th house storyline, plotline, with having the sun in the 8th house for me. That is kind of like, it has shaped my story, and it's time for me to really go. My word of this year is transformation. It's a big word of the year for everybody, but I decided to embrace that word. And even though I'm very good at transformation, where am I not applying that transformation where it would probably make the biggest difference? Transmutation in, and consciously choosing again and taking our power back. So where have I given my power away in my finances, and to make sure that doesn't happen to me again. Okay, so just to let you know that there will be no online moon ceremony for the new moon in Aquarius. I'm really sorry, but that week I have got the celebration of life of my dad's best friend. I am teaching, I have dance rehearsals for a show, we have the gong bath, and there just isn't a date that I could find. I'm covering some classes as well for another teacher, so I just couldn't find a place where it was appropriate and a good time for me to do that online. So I am creating a workbook, and if you would like that workbook sent to you, then I will pop it onto my social media and onto my website and into the show notes here of how you can get hold of that. It's not quite ready for purchase yet, but I will make sure that that is ready before the new moon in Aquarius on the 29th for you. And yes, been going on for 41 minutes now, so I am going to sign off and wish you all a really good week, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week.